Hey everyone, buckle up. It's time for an epic ride. Deep in a secluded forest, Drasa awakens to the distant sound of an approaching airplane. Instantly alert, she readies her weapon. The moment a man disembarks from the winged machine, she fires a single, precise shot that ends his life. Meanwhile, former Marine Levi stirs from a terrifying nightmare and decides to clear his mind by spending the morning at the beach. Later, as dawn breaks, he receives a text instructing him to report to the Marine Corps base. At the base, Levi is soon introduced to Agent Bartholomew, who is well aware of his impressive career as an elite sniper. Knowing that he has no family or close friends, she offers him a new assignment. Across the ocean in Lithuania, Drasa meets her father at the cemetery on the anniversary of her mother's death. Her father, having recently learned that his cancer is beyond treatment, solemnly announces that if he survives until February 14th, he intends to end his own life so that he can reunite with his wife on Valentine's Day. In September, Levi awakens on a military transport plane from an anesthesia-induced slumber. Confused, he asks a nearby soldier for their location, but she is not permitted to disclose any details. Instead, she confiscates all his personal belongings and informs him that they are approaching a no-fly zone. With no other choice, Levi is told he must jump from the plane and trek the remaining distance on foot. Clutching his assigned bag, he leaps from the aircraft and waits for the optimal moment to deploy his parachute. Levi lands safely and begins a grueling journey involving steep climbs, arduous treks, and nights spent camping in the wild. Eventually, he reaches the rim of a vast gorge. Here, he encounters Soldier JD, a man who has been stationed at this isolated location for an entire year and remains as uncertain as Levi about their whereabouts. Together, they make their way to the West Tower, a completely self-sustaining outpost powered by solar energy, backed by a generator, equipped with a rainwater collection system, featuring a vegetable garden and surrounded by ample wild game. Across the gorge stands the East Tower, but any contact with its guard is strictly forbidden. The gorge itself is rigged with landmines and tactical barriers along its northern and southern flanks, leaving no safe passage. As JD continues to guide Levi around, he outlines the mission. Every day, Levi must patrol the western rim and replenish the ammunition in the automated gun turrets placed every 600 meters. Additionally, Levi is responsible for inspecting the containment fence, checking the suspended mines, and monitoring cloakers, devices that emit false signals to mislead satellites, keeping the gorge hidden from prying reconnaissance. Radio check-ins occur every 30 days, yet there is no means of communication with the outside world. In emergencies, a panic button will trigger the stray dog protocol. Although JD admits he is unsure what that entails, he advises Levi to run if it ever activates. JD explains that this secretive facility dates back to the Cold War, when military teams from different nations forged a pact to keep the gorge hidden, so hidden that even heads of state were unaware of its existence. Levi's sole mission is to ensure nothing escapes the gorge. It sounds almost unbelievable, and JD confesses that he too doubted it until he witnessed something the guards referred to as hollow men, a sound that now echoes hauntingly throughout the gorge. JD recalls that in the late 1940s, 3 battalions of cavalry totaling 2,400 men were sent in to clear the gorge, yet none returned, prompting the military to focus on containment instead. After delivering his briefing, JD departs the tower and hikes to the designated pickup point. A helicopter arrives, lowering a rope for extraction. As JD climbs aboard, a soldier asks him to state his identity. Once JD provides the correct password, the soldier coldly shoots him in the head and drops his body into the mountains. A month later, Levi has settled into his monotonous routine. He patrols the perimeter daily, performs routine maintenance on the security systems, and checks in via radio. The voice on the other end offers nothing more than curt inquiries about whether all is well and promptly hangs up before Levi can ask any questions of his own. Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support powers our adventures. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive back into the adventure. While tending to the garden one day, Levi notices movement near the East Tower. He rushes to his binoculars and sees Drasa busy cutting wood. Although she glances in his direction, she pays him little heed. Later that night, during a fierce storm, Levi is jolted awake by a vivid nightmare. In his panic, he accidentally shatters a glass, momentarily believing he is under attack. Realizing the injury is accidental when he feels a sharp pain in his foot, he calms down. While cleaning his injured foot, Levi notices that Drasa is still awake and appears to be watching him. When she senses his gaze, she quickly retreats to her room for the night. Another month passes, and Drasa is forced to celebrate her birthday alone. Tired of the isolation, she fires a shot into the air to capture Levi's attention and holds up a sign displaying her name. Levi, abiding by protocol, writes back that they are not allowed to communicate, but Drasa defiantly replies with her name, declaring that on her birthday she will do as she pleases. An amused Levi responds by writing his own name and raising his glass in a toast. Soon, Drasa cranks up the music and dances exuberantly, prompting Levi to ask her to join him in a dance. Admitting that he is a terrible dancer but an exceptional sniper, Levi is met with Drasa's playful retort. She jokingly shoots his water bottle. Quick on his feet, Levi fires back at her bottle, and in retaliation, Drasa balances another bottle on her head as part of their quirky game. However, the lighthearted moment is interrupted when she notices something moving along the gorge. Peering over the edge, Levi spots bizarre tree-like creatures scaling the gorge wall. Reacting swiftly, he shoots one of the creatures, causing it to tumble onto a mine which detonates and brings down most of the climbers. Yet a few manage to ascend, prompting Levi to continue firing while Drasa assists him with her machine gun. Working in tandem, they eliminate the remaining creatures in just a few minutes. Just as they begin to believe the threat has subsided, a creature reaches Drasa's balcony. She fires her weapon several times, eventually knocking it off the ledge. However, more monsters begin to scale the wall on her side, forcing both Levi and Drasa to collaborate once again to hold them back. Another creature falls onto a mine, triggering a fresh explosion that hurls a fragment of metal, injuring Drasa's shoulder. As the monstrous attackers begin to swarm both sides of the gorge, Levi and Drasa unleash a barrage from their machine guns and activate additional mines. Their combined efforts eventually wipe out the threat until no more creatures appear. The following morning, Drasa tends to her wounds and tells Levi that, despite everything, this was the best birthday she's ever had. Levi then heads out to repair the damage and replace the spent mines. Suddenly, a drone emerges from the depths of the gorge and swiftly flies away. In December, seeking to lift the spirits of his isolated existence, Levi decorates a tree in the forest with a string of lights, fashioning it into a makeshift Christmas tree, and even hangs a sign dedicated to Drasa. From that point on, Levi and Drasa begin sharing more activities together, building snowmen with each other's names, engaging in chess matches, and even having impromptu drum battles using pots as percussion instruments. On February 14th, Levi finds Drasa in tears in front of a cherished family portrait. Concerned, he asks why she didn't join him on patrol earlier, and she confesses that she's been having a particularly rough day, wishing he could be there with her. Motivated by her distress, Levi gathers all the tools from the armory and constructs a special contraption. He fires a rocket across the gorge, which becomes lodged in a tree. The rocket's impact sets off a small fire, and Drasa races to extinguish it. In the process, she discovers that the rocket is tethered to a rope. Acting quickly, she secures the rope to the tree before sprinting back to the tower, where she finds Levi waiting to invite her to dinner. Levi then descends the gorge by sliding down the rope, but halfway through, he becomes stuck. Fortunately, he is wearing gloves, which allow him to grip the rope firmly until he can continue his descent. Eventually, he reaches Drasa's tower and presents her with a bouquet of flowers. Drasa teases him, noting that he smells from all the exertion, and Levi concedes that he deserves a shower. While he cleans up, Drasa takes the opportunity to exchange his worn uniform for a set of better clothes left behind by a previous occupant. During dinner, they reflect on their experiences as mercenaries and the toll that such a life exacts on one's mind, before sharing an intimate dance that soon escalates into a passionate encounter. The next morning, Levi begins his descent back to his tower by sliding along the rope. At that moment, the dreaded Hollow Men appear, clambering along his wall and setting off a mine that detonates with a deafening explosion, severing the rope. Instinctively, Levi deploys his parachute while Drasa dashes to her armory to retrieve additional weapons and a spare parachute. Drasa jumps into the gorge and, after a long, free-falling descent, lands in a fast-flowing river. On impact, her parachute becomes entangled on a rock, forcing her to cut it free. The river's current immediately begins to pull her along, and she crashes into a submerged rock, inadvertently dropping her auto-ascender. Battling against the current, Drasa clings desperately to a cluster of tree roots until she can pull herself onto dry land. Meanwhile, Levi remains unconscious, suspended from a gnarled tree. Suddenly, a branch stirs, revealing itself to be a monstrous sentient limb. As it draws near, Levi awakens and frantically begins firing at it while simultaneously working to untangle the ropes that bind him to the tree. He falls to the ground, landing in what he believes is a patch of mud. However, the substance begins to move, revealing itself as the gaping maw of another creature. The sticky mass quickly ensnares Levi, its mouth slowly closing around him. Just in the nick of time, Drasa hears his desperate cries and rushes to his aid, opening fire on the creature and rescuing him. With a sharp knife, she scrapes away the adhesive substance from his body, and together, they scurry toward the wall in search of the lost rope. Suddenly, a piercing screech fills the air as two hollow men, mounted on horses that eerily resemble trees, burst into view. The mounted riders launch a fierce assault, slashing at Levi and Drasa with swords. One of the riders even leaps from his horse, attempting to overpower Drasa directly. With steely resolve, she plunges her knife into his neck, sending him tumbling to the ground, and then fires a shot directly into his face. The remaining rider seizes Levi's gun and whips it away, but Levi quickly recovers, drawing his own weapon to take down both the horse and the rider in rapid succession. After the skirmish, Drasa checks her belongings and discovers that her auto-ascender has been lost in the river. With the sheer height of the walls preventing them from scaling directly, she suggests that they follow the river's course, as it must eventually lead to an exit. Levi examines one of the fallen creatures and finds a weathered military uniform, confirming that these hollow men were once part of a lost cavalry battalion. The duo presses on through the forest, their path littered with hundreds of skeletons. They eventually stumble upon an abandoned town where every building is overrun by mutated plants, and the ground bears the scars of a recent earthquake. The eerie sounds of creatures echo in the distance, prompting them to take refuge inside an old church. Inside, the pews are scattered with skeletal remains, a grim reminder of past tragedies. Levi's nostrils catch the bitter tang of cyanide, a scent that confirms the townspeople had resorted to self-destruction in despair. Suddenly, a noise startles them. Drasa looks up to see an enormous spider leaping in their direction. Without hesitation, she shoves it aside, only to be knocked to the ground as another spider approaches. As she plunges her knife into the intruder, two more spiders ambush Levi, who quickly dispatches them with precise shots. Within moments, a swarm of spiders surrounds them. Both Levi and Drasa continue to fire their weapons in a desperate attempt to neutralize as many of the creatures as possible. Drasa soon runs out of ammunition, and Levi rushes to her side to reload. Just then, a group of hollow men bursts into the room, forcing the two to split their focus between the arachnid attackers and the monstrous riders. Levi engages in close combat with several creatures, managing to take them down after a harrowing struggle. Seizing the moment, Drasa launches a grenade at the back wall, creating a massive hole that allows them to make their escape. Levi and Drasa dash through the forest, the eerie sounds of monstrous screeches echoing in the distance. Deciding that their current location leaves them too exposed, the pair move closer to the wall. They discover an old creaking door and manage to force their way inside, only to find a long-abandoned facility, overtaken by rampant vegetation. As they venture deeper, they learn that this was once a military laboratory. Amid scattered skeletons, Drasa finds an old generator which he manages to restart. In the lab, Levi uncovers a dusty tape recorder and plays the recording on an old projector. The film shows a scientist explaining that it is 1946, and that a secret coalition of nations had formed during the final years of World War II to develop biochemical missiles. However, 6 days before the recording, an earthquake struck, causing a chemical leak that merged with the DNA of local flora and fauna, mutating them. The scientist notes that short exposure has little effect, but prolonged exposure proved disastrous, evidenced by a woman on the screen whose body is grotesquely overgrown with plant branches. The recording reveals that the scientists worked around the clock to contain the toxin, but ultimately, the contaminated area was isolated to the gorge, sparing the rest of humanity. In another room, Levi and Drasa discover a computer from the late 2000s, suggesting that even after the initial incident, people continued their experiments. Levi learns that the facility is owned by Darklake, a private paramilitary corporation, and that the drone he saw earlier was collecting samples for their experiments, which aim to create super soldiers. The computer also explains the stray dog protocol, which is actually a nuclear bomb designed to sterilize the area in the event of a leak. As they exit the lab, Levi tells Drasa that despite everything, the mission was worthwhile because it allowed him to meet her. They step outside and toss a smoke grenade to cover their escape. Suddenly, a whip, wielded by a hollow man, snatches at Drasa's ankle, dragging her into the dark forest. Desperate, she tries to cut the whip with her knife, but she crashes into a tree and loses her grip. Unsure if she can fire accurately while under attack, Drasa struggles to shoot at the assailant as rocks and fallen branches continuously strike her. Levi tracks the creature's path and eventually discovers the facility housing the nuclear bomb. Inside, he finds the hollow man holding Drasa captive, using a splintered branch embedded in her side as a weapon of torture. Drasa musters her strength and delivers a powerful kick to the hollow man's chest, freeing herself from his grip. She then seizes a piece of scrap metal and uses it as a makeshift weapon. Although the hollow man initially overpowers her and a venomous snake emerges from his chest, Drasa perseveres, decapitating the snake with a final, determined blow. Enraged, the hollow man gives chase, and a fierce sword fight ensues. The battle intensifies as Drasa, now armed with her stolen metal weapon, fights valiantly against the relentless hollow man. Despite the monster's attempts to overpower her, she manages to wound it severely, and the creature retreats momentarily, allowing her to catch her breath. Using bones as a shield and igniting a small torch from the nearby bonfire, Drasa presses her advantage, setting her enemy ablaze. As the hollow man screams in agony, Levi finally arrives and delivers a fatal shot, ending the threat. In the aftermath, as the two briefly embrace, Levi notices an insignia on the fallen hollow man's uniform, an emblem that he recognizes as belonging to the first guard of his tower. After retrieving the creature's discarded sword, Levi and Drasa make their way toward the site of the initial chemical leak. They encounter mutated beings ensnared in the toxic goo that still oozes across the ground. The duo carefully crosses a rickety bridge, while eerie breathing faces can be seen within the viscous substance. Drasa inadvertently steps on a gnarled root, and as she tugs at the sticky mass, several bodies begin to collapse as if attempting to capture her. Quick-thinking Levi slices through the entangling roots with his sword, freeing her from their grasp. However, larger, more menacing creatures begin to stir and roar in the distance, and as Levi continues his desperate efforts to clear a path, a sticky goo whip lashes out and drags him down. Reacting swiftly, Drasa fires a grenade behind them, igniting a massive explosion that sets the goo structure ablaze. The inferno rapidly consumes the mutated creatures, and the duo seizes the moment to make their escape. They search the nearby abandoned town and eventually locate a garage filled with military jeeps. After performing some quick maintenance on an engine, they commandeer one jeep and speed away, only to discover a broken rope lying abandoned on the roadside. Without hesitation, Levi secures the broken rope to the jeep, while Drasa fends off approaching hollow men by firing her weapon. When she exhausts her ammunition, they swap positions, and once the jeep is ready, they begin ascending the wall. Initially, the ascent is smooth, but soon they realize that the hollow men are relentlessly climbing after them. Determined to repel the attackers, they work together, kicking one of the creatures away, and Levi uses his sword to eliminate several others. Drasa locates an old axe in a nearby toolbox and uses it to dispatch more foes. As Levi pushes one of the monsters against the jeep's wheels, Drasa smashes another that threatens to block the windshield. Suddenly, a hollow man leaps out, attempting to push Levi. In a desperate maneuver, Levi clutches the jeep at the last possible moment, but is left hanging precariously. In a final act of defiance, he stabs the jeep's gas tank before climbing back on board, then ignites a flare and hurls it at the advancing creatures. The flare, combining with leaking propane, triggers a massive explosion that incinerates the enemy, though it also causes the jeep to explode. Levi suffers a broken leg from colliding with the wall, and Drasa quickly helps him up. Realizing they are now closer to the top, they decide to cut the rope and let the jeep fall onto the remaining hollow men as a final assault. Afterward, the duo climbs the rest of the way and returns to Drasa's tower. Once safely inside, they tend to their injuries and agree to isolate themselves for 5 days as a precautionary quarantine, in case either has been infected. Before parting ways temporarily, they share a tender kiss, and Levi confesses his love for Drasa. The next day, during their routine radio check-in, Levi is surprised when his call is answered by Agent Bartholomew herself. She has learned that the laboratory computer had been left on. When Levi denies any involvement in entering the gorge, Bartholomew concludes that it must have been the person from the other tower. Consequently, his new mission is to eliminate that individual. Levi feigns compliance until the call abruptly ends. It is then revealed that the lab computer had a hidden camera, and Bartholomew, fully informed, contacts a commander to mobilize a team to search the gorge. The next morning, while the soldiers prepare mines for their operation, Drasa writes a heartfelt message reading, "I love you" back for Levi. At that moment, they spot a helicopter approaching, and they immediately sprint through the forest. When the soldiers later discover that the towers are deserted, they deploy drones, triggering a chaotic chase. The drones open fire, and Levi and Drasa return fire, taking down multiple drones while sustaining minor injuries. Finally reaching a vantage point high above, they assume sniper positions and begin targeting the cloakers. Thanks to the mines they had set earlier, a chain reaction ensues that decimates the cloakers in the vicinity. However, with the gorge now exposed, the stray dog protocol activates. Agent Bartholomew and her team rush to the helicopter to evacuate, while Levi and Drasa sprint with all their might. In a sudden, cataclysmic moment, a nuclear bomb detonates. The colossal explosion forces the helicopter to crash, obliterating everyone aboard. Levi is caught in the blast and is violently pushed off the edge of a cliff, plunging into a raging river below. Drasa manages to escape the immediate carnage and takes refuge in a nearby cave, waiting for any sign of Levi. After a long, agonizing month with no word from him, Drasa makes the painful decision to leave on her own. Sometime later, in France, Drasa is working as a waitress when, to her astonishment, she spots Levi sitting at a table. He explains that it took him a long time to recover from his injuries, and the two are finally reunited with a long-awaited tender kiss. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our other videos. See you next time.